July 7th, 1944. A back road near the village of La Haye-du-Puy in northern France. Late afternoon. The air thick with smoke, the sky hanging low like a blanket about to fall. Private Thomas Hawkins, a 24-year-old farm boy from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, crouched behind a broken hedgerow. Mud caked his face. Blood trickled from above his right eyebrow. In front of him stood the battered remains of a 57mm anti-tank gun. The sighting scope had been shattered that morning. 4 armor-piercing shells left. No radio, no backup, no orders. From the distance came a familiar rumble, low and steady like thunder rolling across concrete. A German Panzer column. At least 10 tanks, maybe more. The steel beasts of the Nazi war machine were closing in, headed straight down that narrow road, the only supply route into the Allied forward position. Hawkins knew the truth. If those tanks broke through, every man in the nearby infantry battalion would be trapped. They had no anti-tank support, no time to run. All he had was a damaged cannon and a prayer. He pressed his cheek against the cracked steel, steadying his breathing. He whispered to himself, "If I get one shot, I'll make it count." What happened over the next 9 minutes would become one of the most shocking moments of the Normandy campaign, and yet almost no one has ever heard of it, until now. Thomas Hawkins was not born to be a soldier. He was born on a patch of farmland outside Lancaster, where the horizon was wider than the world he imagined. His father raised dairy cattle. His mother kept 6 children moving like clockwork. Thomas was the youngest, quiet, red-haired, thin as the fence posts that lined their fields. His father had given him a small .22 caliber rifle when he turned 10. They would hunt squirrels and rabbits before sunrise. His father's rule was simple: never waste a shot. If you were going to pull the trigger, you had to feel the rhythm of the wind, the weight of the air, the heartbeat in your fingertips. "You don't shoot with your eyes, Tommy," his father would say. "You shoot with your gut." Years later, that single sentence would decide the fate of a German Panzer column. When the war reached across the ocean, Thomas did not rush to enlist. But on March 1943, the letter came. Selective Service Draft Notice. He left home with 1 duffel bag and a folded photograph of his family's farm dog, Rex. Basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia was hell, but Hawkins was steady. Not the strongest, not the fastest, but dependable. An instructor noticed his calm under pressure and moved him to anti-tank training. The Americans called it the 57mm gun. To Hawkins, it was simply the mule. He learned to strip it, oil it, and reassemble it blindfolded. In May 1944, his unit boarded a troop ship bound for England. On the 3rd night, he listened to older soldiers whispering about German tanks, the Panzers that had crushed France in 1940. They said the armor was so thick that small-caliber shells bounced off like pebbles. By early July, they were pushing deeper into Normandy. Hawkins checked his weapon, packed his rations, and said nothing. He wasn't thinking about liberation or glory. He was thinking about whether he'd still be able to hear Pennsylvania crickets after the first shot fired. 4 days later, he would drag that same 57mm gun through the mud, his heart pounding, not from fear, but from duty. The village of La Haye-du-Puy was too quiet that morning. By July 7th, the American front line had pushed south from Utah Beach, but intelligence had missed one critical fact. A German Panzer column was moving north, fast. Private Hawkins and his gun crew had been ordered to hold the eastern approach into town. Their position was near a tree line overlooking a narrow gravel road. They had arrived the night before and spent the morning preparing fallback points. Then, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the first sound came. A faint hum, a tremble in the ground, the kind of vibration that reaches your spine before your ears. Hawkins stood still, his hand resting on the cold steel barrel. The sound grew louder, not just one engine, but many. The unmistakable grinding of treads, the low rumble of something heavy and deliberate. He raised his field glasses. Through the mist he saw them, black crosses on dark gray hulls. Panzer Mark V tanks, at least 3 abreast, followed by armored half-tracks and supply trucks. He counted at least 10 vehicles, maybe more. This wasn't a patrol. This was a full mechanized counterattack. If they broke through, the village would fall. Infantry companies inside would be overrun. Hawkins lowered his binoculars. No time to radio for support. No air cover. No artillery. Just 4 men, a damaged cannon, and a handful of armor-piercing rounds. To make matters worse, their sighting scope had cracked during a shell impact that morning. It was still usable, but inaccurate. Replacements were unavailable. Hawkins turned to the others. He said, "We're not going to stop them all, but we can slow them down."
Private Kenny, sweating through his undershirt, asked, "How many shells we got left?" 4. That's it. No one spoke. Hawkins took a knee, placed a hand on the cannon's breech, and closed his eyes. He could feel the rhythm of the approaching machines. The air tasted metallic, like rust and rain. He wasn't afraid, not exactly. What he felt was something colder, something clearer, a certainty that no one else was coming, that they were alone, and that every second counted. Private Thomas Hawkins had never fired the 57mm anti-tank gun in live combat. Until now. The lead Panzer rolled forward like a steel fist through fog. A Mark V, 30 tons of iron, a 75mm cannon and armor thick enough to shrug off small arms fire. Kenny lifted the first armor-piercing shell, hands trembling. Hawkins tried to line up the cannon despite the cracked scope. Only distortion. He adjusted left, still wrong. "We're blind," he muttered. His eyes scanned the terrain. The road narrowed at a small stone bridge about 200 yards down. He noticed dampness on the far edge, erosion from recent rain. He wasn't going to shoot the tank. He was going to shoot the road. He loaded it. "You sure?" Kenny asked. "No, but I'm not waiting for permission." He lined up the barrel just right of the bridge's corner, took a long breath, and fired. The shell struck the bridge's support wall. Stone erupted. Dirt crumbled. Not a full collapse, but enough. The path was fractured, uneven, and dangerous. The lead Panzer saw the damage too late. Its right tread slipped over the loose edge, tilting the tank off balance. The massive machine ground to a halt, blocking the road completely. Behind it, chaos. The second and third Panzers slammed on their brakes, one skidded sideways into the ditch. The line was broken, bunched up, clustered, exposed. "Give me the second shell," Hawkins said. This time, he aimed for the fuel truck at the rear of the convoy. He fired. The explosion was instant and enormous. Flames shot 20 feet into the air. The heat was blinding. Shrapnel tore through nearby vehicles. One half-track caught fire, igniting its ammunition. Secondary blasts rocked the countryside. In less than 60 seconds, the Panzer column had turned into a traffic jam of steel and flame. Kenny looked over, eyes wide. "Holy hell, Tommy!" Hawkins was already reaching for the third shell. "We're not done." Smoke blanketed the field like a curtain. The once unstoppable German column was no longer a line. It was a knot, tangled, burning, confused. The third shell clanked into place. One of the Panthers, sleek and heavily armored, had backed into a clearing, attempting to reverse out of the ambush zone. If it escaped, it could flank the American line or call in reinforcements. Hawkins adjusted the cannon by memory. He pulled the trigger. The shell struck the Panther's rear armor. The impact disabled the engine,
black smoke billowed, the tank lurched forward and died in place. Now the Germans were panicking. Voices barked orders, soldiers dismounted, running for cover. Others fired blindly toward the tree line, searching for an enemy they couldn't see. "Shell number 4!" Hawkins shouted. Kenny hesitated. "We only got one left after this." "Then let's make this one count." He turned the cannon toward 2 tanks wedged side by side in confusion. Their treads had locked up, a perfect target. The cannon fired. The shell hit low beneath the turret. Sparks and flame burst from underneath. The tank rocked violently, then stopped. Dead. A 50-ton corpse in the middle of the kill zone. For the first time, he heard something new. Silence. No engines revving. No shouted commands, just the crackle of fire and the slow metallic groan of cooling armor. The Panzer column was paralyzed, pinned between a collapsed bridge, burning wrecks, and blocked escape routes. But then he saw it. A lone panther, still mobile, inching forward through the trees on the far left flank, moving slow, quietly, using cover like a hunter. It had seen the muzzle flash of Hawkins' gun. It was coming for him. 1 shell left. The surviving panther moved like a predator, slow, quiet, deliberate. Its turret rotated, searching for the source of the ambush. "Tommy, it's coming," Kenny whispered. "I see it." 1 shell left in the crate. No backup, no room for error, no time to relocate. The Panther would have a clear shot in under a minute, and its 75mm cannon could rip through trees, bunkers, or bone without slowing down. Hawkins lifted the last shell. It felt heavier than the others, not physically, but mentally. The weight of everything they had left was inside that one casing. "You with me?" he asked Kenny. Kenny nodded, lips tight. "Then load it." The round slid into the chamber. The breech clanged shut. The Panther moved into position, its barrel now pointed straight at the hedgerow where the Americans were dug in. Hawkins didn't have a clear shot. Tree cover, smoke, uneven ground, all of it made aiming nearly impossible. But then he remembered hunting squirrels with his dad, the times when the sights were useless. His father's voice came back like a whisper. "You don't aim with your eyes, you aim with your gut." He let the memory settle, then dropped to one knee, adjusted the cannon by feel. No sight, no markers, just instinct. He exhaled slowly, fired. The shot left the barrel with a crack like the sky splitting open. Half a second of silence, then impact. The shell slammed into the Panther's left tread, blew through the outer skirt armor, and ruptured the engine block. The tank screamed, a mechanical, tortured sound, before the turret collapsed sideways and the vehicle stopped cold. Kenny dropped to his knees, laughing from shock. "You got it, Tommy! You got it!" But Hawkins didn't move. His hands stayed on the cannon, eyes locked on the smoking shell of what had nearly killed them. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to believe it was over. The battlefield had gone quiet. No more cannon fire, only the distant crackle of burning fuel and the low moans of wounded men. Private Hawkins stood slowly, legs shaky. The back of his neck was soaked in sweat. His right hand was blistered from the heat of the cannon. "Tommy, you did it! You stopped them!" But Hawkins didn't respond. His eyes stayed fixed on the burning wrecks ahead. Then, out of nowhere, came a shrill metallic whistle, the unmistakable shriek of incoming mortar fire. Before either man could react, a German mortar round landed 10 yards from their position. The blast erupted like thunder. Shrapnel sliced the air. Hawkins was thrown backward. His body hit the ground with a sickening thud. Blood soaked through his left side. A jagged piece of metal had torn through his ribs. Kenny scrambled over, grabbing his shoulders. "Tommy! Tommy, stay with me!" Hawkins blinked slowly, eyes glassy but conscious. He tried to speak. His lips moved, but no sound came. Kenny pressed down on the wound, sobbing. "Don't you leave, man. We're going to get help." But Hawkins lifted one trembling hand and touched Kenny's arm, then turned his head slightly toward the cannon, still smoking, still facing forward. His mouth moved again, a whisper, barely audible. "Tell them we held." His eyes didn't close. They just stopped moving, still open, still focused, still guarding. Kenny sat there holding his friend until the medics arrived 20 minutes later. They found the cannon unmanned, blood-stained, still aimed at the spot where the last Panther died. And beside it, Private Thomas Hawkins, silent, still, one hand resting on the breech lever, like he never let go. By the time reinforcements arrived, the sun had begun to set. A scout jeep from the 79th Infantry Division rolled to a stop at the ambush site. Lieutenant Randall Wood stepped out, scanning the scene with disbelief. 12 vehicles lay destroyed or abandoned. 4 of them were tanks, Panzers and one Panther, blackened, twisted, silent. A fuel truck reduced to a charred skeleton. "This wasn't air support," Wood said to his radio operator. "No, sir. No airstrike was called in." "Then what did this?" The medics found Private Kenny sitting next to a body draped in a blood-soaked tarp. Hawkins. Kenny wouldn't let go of him, wouldn't speak at first. Eventually, a chaplain knelt beside him and asked, "Did he die fast?" Kenny answered softly, "He died standing his ground." Lieutenant Woods ordered a full inspection. They found only one American anti-tank position, the 57mm gun with the shattered scope, covered in dust and blood, barrel still smoking. 4 shells used, 4 confirmed hits, all within minutes, all with perfect timing, all without a functioning sight. The official after-action report read, "It is the assessment of this command that Private Thomas Hawkins, acting without orders and using an impaired weapons system, delayed and disabled an armored column estimated at 10 to 12 vehicles, resulting in the preservation of the town of La Haye-du-Puy and prevention of major American casualties." The word began to spread, first among artillery crews, then tank units, then division headquarters. "Did you hear about the red-haired farm boy with the busted cannon? The guy who stopped the whole column? Said he aimed with his gut." No one believed it at first, but no one could explain it either. A Distinguished Service Cross was approved, one of the highest awards the U.S. Army could give for valor under fire. By then, Thomas Hawkins was buried. They laid him to rest at the Normandy American Cemetery, Plot D, Row 23, grave number 18. White cross. Inscription simple. PVT Thomas J. Hawkins, Pennsylvania, July 7, 1944. He was 24 years old. His mother received the telegram, then the medals, then the letter found in his chest pocket, blood-stained but intact. Dated July 6th, the day before the ambush. He had written, "Dear Ma, by the time you read this, I'm deep in France. Everyone's scared but won't admit it. Me too. I just want to do my part and come home. If I don't, I hope you won't cry too hard. If I don't come back, tell Dad I remembered the squirrels. He'll understand. Love you always, Tommy." His mother kept the letter in her Bible for the rest of her life. Years later, when a war memorial was built in Lancaster County, she stood at the unveiling with quiet grace. She didn't cry. She just touched her gloved hand to her son's name and said, "He was never reckless. He just didn't wait for permission to do what was right." Decades passed, the war ended, towns rebuilt, nations moved on. But the story of Thomas Hawkins didn't fade. It lived in boot camp stories passed from instructors to recruits. It was cited in field manuals as a case study in improvised aim under combat duress. At Fort Sill, Oklahoma, new artillerymen were shown a diagram labeled simply Hawkins' position. He was never famous, never featured in a movie, no statue bears his likeness. Yet among the men who knew what it meant to stare down a Panzer with nothing but guts and steel, his name held weight. And in Normandy, the locals remembered. The road where the battle occurred was later renamed in quiet tribute, Chemin du Canon Solitaire, the road of the lone gun. No ceremony, no ribbon cutting, just a wooden sign nailed to a post where poppies bloom each July. Every year on the anniversary, a small group of French schoolchildren come and place flowers at the old hedgerow. Their teachers tell them, "One man stood here, and because he stood, we are free." There's a temptation to label stories like this as myth, to assume no real person could stand alone against tanks and terror and win. But the truth is, wars are not won only by generals or air raids. They're often decided in places no one planned for, by people no one expected. People like Private Thomas Hawkins. He wasn't larger than life. He didn't have perfect aim. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He simply understood something too many forget. That in the face of overwhelming force, the one thing no enemy can predict is courage. His scope was broken. His team was scattered. His weapon was outdated. But his will? Intact, unshakable. It didn't come from rank or reputation. It came from memory, of his father's voice, of Pennsylvania fields, of a little hunting rifle, and a rule as old as war itself. Never waste your shot. Hawkins aimed not with his eyes, but with his life. He didn't just stop a column of tanks. He stopped fear from advancing 1 inch further. And in doing so, he reminded us that the battlefield is not always a place. Sometimes it's a moment. One breath, one choice, one shot. He made his, and it counted.